Welcome, everyone. If you're here to learn about Saw-whet Owls, you have found your way to the right place. My name is Brett Thielen. I'm the science director with the Harris Center, and with me here is Phil Brown. You want to introduce yourself, Phil?
Yeah, I'm Phil Brown. I'm the Bird Conservation Director with the Harris Center.
And Phil and I work with tonight's presenter, Hillary, on the Harris Center's Saw-whet Owl project, and I'll introduce her in just a minute. The Harris Center for Conservation Education is a nonprofit organization based in the Monadnock region of Southwest New Hampshire, where we help people fall in love with the natural world. And we do that through land protection, conservation research, which you're going to hear about tonight, and education for all ages. Those of you who are local, I always like to share that we've now protected more than 25,000 acres of land from development. Much of that is open for hiking, birding, owl prowls, and other recreation. Conservation research, we support that on our conserved lands, including the Saw-whet Owl project you're going to hear about tonight, but also throughout the region through a variety of community science projects where we train folks like you to help collect data. And then really at the heart of everything we do is education for all ages, from babies in backpacks to residents of retirement communities and all points in between. I am so excited tonight to be able to introduce Hillary and for us to be talking about our own Saw-whet owl banding program. We've had other visiting biologists talk about their Saw-whet projects, and this tonight is really special to get to talk about ours. So by day, Hillary is a wildlife biologist with the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, where she works on a variety of wildlife and habitat monitoring and management projects. By night, in the fall, she is the Harris Center's lead bander on our Saw-whet owl banding project. She got her start in the world of saw-whet banding in 2009 and continued working on that during her time at Antioch University, New England, where she received her master's degree in conservation biology. And she also kind of mentioned that ever since that time, we've been kind of wanting to start saw-whet owl banding with the Harris Center. And so Phil really had to twist her arm in 2022 to get her back to do saw-whet banding. Not really, we didn't have to twist her arm at all because it's so much fun. And so it's such a pleasure to welcome her back to the Harris Center after our last fall season of banding and to kind of turn things over to Hill. So
hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm excited to be here this evening to talk to you a little bit about our Northern Saw-whet Owl banding project that we've been working on for the last couple of years. So this is a bit of the layout you can expect to hear over the next 45 minutes or so. I'll go over a little bit about saw-whet ecology and what we know about their migration and movements. I'll cover why we ban birds and what we can learn from different banding studies that different scientists do. We'll talk about some of the goals for the Harris Center banding project and how we are part of a larger monitoring network called Project OwlNet. I'll also do a quick review of the methods that we follow for this research, our results, of course, in the last couple of years, and what these results mean in the larger picture of saw-whet research. And then we'll talk about the future of this project and what you can do in your own backyard for saw-whets as well. So the saw-whet is our smallest owl in the Northeast. It's slightly smaller than a screech owl, if you've ever had the pleasure to come across that species before. Otherwise, for easier reference, it's about the same size as a robin or so. Saw-whets have several vocalizations. Their territorial or breeding call is a repetitive tooting noise. It can sound a little bit like a garbage truck backing up. It's most often heard between March and May. But they're actually named for one of the calls that they make, which is described as sounding like the sharpening of a saw with a whetstone. They're a secretive species because they are highly nocturnal. They hunt mostly at night. And you're most likely to hear them in the evenings or find one during the day if it's being mobbed by smaller songbirds that are feeling threatened by it. Part of their camouflage involves staying very still in dense shrubs or leaves or needles of different trees. This makes them very difficult to find, even if they are being mobbed by songbirds. They primarily eat small mammals, especially redback voles and boreal regions, and white-footed mice and deer mice across much of their range, such as is pictured down in the bottom corner of the slide here. They are also known to take songbirds, large insects, even bats and crustaceans, especially during migration time. Their prey can weigh more than 20 grams. If that's the case, if they do eat something larger than 20 grams, they may be eaten in 2 meals. They've been known to stash extra prey in cavities or in branches. And like other owls, saw-whets are adapted to be effective hunters. They use their keen eyesight to see in very low light conditions. They use their ears and facial disc to help triangulate the location of different prey, and their silent flight to effectively hunt unsuspecting prey as well. So saw-whets are primarily found in mature forested habitat of boreal and temperate regions, especially during breeding season. During migration and in the winter, they are also found in forests, but can be found just about anywhere there is good cover and structure, such as dense thickets in old shrub fields, dense shrubs in your own backyard, messy branches from fallen trees, conifer groves. They can be found in a whole bunch of different places as long as there's good cover. For nesting, they seek out natural cavities in trees, usually ones originally constructed by woodpeckers. They will also use nest boxes pretty readily. They rarely return to the same nest location in subsequent years. For nesting, they lay about 5 white round eggs, with more eggs possible when food is abundant. The female incubates the eggs for about 28 days and broods the young, while the male brings the food. The young leave the nest after 4 to 5 weeks, but the male continues to bring food for another month or so. And the female may sometimes find another mate and have a second nest when prey is abundant, but that's pretty infrequent that occurs. So saw-whets are widespread across North America. They breed in more northern regions or at higher altitudes in southern mountain areas. So you can see that in the purple on this map as their year-round range and their breeding range. Their movements are difficult to categorize because they don't seem to fit perfectly into any one box. The females predictably migrate short distances every year, with the males potentially not migrating, or at least not as far, and we'll talk more about that later. They also exhibit some nomadic behavior in that they don't breed or even winter in the same location year after year. And then furthermore, they exhibit some eruptive behavior when after a good breeding season, there's lots of young birds that move south in the fall, and sometimes further south than is typical for a regular year. This eruptive cycle is documented to occur roughly every 4 years or so. Like many bird species, saw-whets face challenges and threats throughout their range that can impact individuals and could have an impact on their population in the future. As they are a forest-dwelling species, loss of forest due to climate change impacts, insect and disease outbreaks, increasing development pressures, urbanization, all of those could potentially impact the breeding and wintering habitats for saw-whets. In terms of climate change, I did want to mention a National Audubon report called Survival by Degrees. It's used climate change models and bird observations to project how climate change will potentially impact the summer and winter range of many bird species. For saw-whets, they're listed as moderately vulnerable in their breeding range, with a 72% prediction of range lost under the most severe climate change scenario. And then they're somewhat vulnerable in their wintering range, with 27% of their range lost. The model points out a few particular threats to saw-whets. One is spring heat waves. Extreme spring heat can cause heat stress in birds and endanger young owls and nests. Another one it lists is wildfire risk. This can completely alter forest habitat and take years to recover and lead to mortality and displacement of saw-whets. And then additionally, excessive rainfall, which is expected to become more frequent with climate change, could potentially flood nests and reduce hunting time and efficiency. Another documented threat to saw-whets is vehicle collisions. Younger birds seem to be more susceptible to this. And then rodenticides are a threat to all raptors. These pesticides operate in such a way that it doesn't kill mice immediately. Instead, those mice may eat the poison, move outside, where it can then be hunted by an owl, resulting in the bird getting sick or potentially dying. So I'll offer some conservation solutions at the end because I know that wasn't the most cheery information I just presented on. But it does help to segue into this next topic as to why it's important to study birds, including saw-whets. Essentially, the more we know about birds, the more we'll be able to understand their status, determine threats facing them, and protect them into the future. So banding is one of the oldest scientific methods used to study birds. It involves catching birds in a net or other related capture device, carefully removing them, identifying them to species, and placing a federally issued metal band with a unique number on their leg. My colleague just the other day described the federal band as a kind of social security number for the bird, which I thought was a good way to describe the uniqueness of each of these bands for these birds. So bands vary in size based on the size of the bird's legs, as you can see in the photo here. Depending on the study or question being asked, scientists may also take measurements on the physical condition of the bird, such as its mass, its wing length, bill length, body fat, etc. They'll age and sex them. They may collect feather or blood samples to look at toxins, for example, or install additional tracking devices on them. And then data collected on the bird is stored by the scientists and entered into a federal database that's housed by the Bird Banding Lab, which is part of USGS. If this bird is ever found again, all data that was ever collected on it will be tied to that band number forever. So banding birds can help to elucidate many questions we have about a specific species, region, or habitat. For example, we can learn about the abundance of a species and population changes. How do their numbers fluctuate, if at all, from year to year, and what trends can we start to observe? We can look at migration routes and timing. If we are banding in the spring or fall, at what dates are we seeing birds of different species move? And is there any changes in timing over the years? We can look at physiological characteristics and changes over time, how long these birds live, their breeding success, causes of mortality, behavior, distribution, and preferred habitats, and offer educational opportunities around this information as well. So all of this information has helped to conserve and manage species. In the case of saw-whets, banding is an especially important tool because of their nocturnal and secretive nature. They are otherwise pretty hard to observe and study. Ornithologists actually originally in the 1800s thought that saw-whets were year-round residents in the northern US. It wasn't until the early 1900s that attention was brought to their migratory behavior when saw-whets were discovered amongst songbirds that had perished over Lake Huron during an autumn storm. So banding for saw-whets in the mid-1900s continued to confirm their migratory nature. However, capture numbers were quite low relative to the effort people were putting into the work. And there was only so much that can be extrapolated from the data. In fact, prior to the 1980s, there was still not much known about them, and they were even considered a candidate for a listing in some northern states because of their presumed rarity. But in 1986, researchers tried using a speaker to broadcast the male's advertising call near nets. And this method was a game changer and significantly increased the number of owls captured in the nets, helping to reveal, in fact, that the species is fairly common, especially during fall migration in more southern areas. This practice of using a speaker became more common over the years, and more banding stations popped up across North America to specifically study the saw-whet. As more banding stations started popping up, a group of dedicated saw-whet banders founded Project OwlNet in 1994. This is a continent-wide organization for coordinating and standardizing owl banding methodology for monitoring the regional and continental-wide population trends. They primarily focus on saw-whets, but there's discussion with other owls in this group as well. And there's a number of resources available through this project in regards to capturing techniques, aging and sexing owls, and analysis recommendations as well. This map is still in the process of being updated, but it shows the location of different Project Owlnet banding stations, reflecting the continent-wide and international effort that this project helps to coordinate. It may be kind of hard to see on this map, but our little dots in New Hampshire are up there. I wanted to quickly mention some of the history of saw-whet banding in this region specifically. There are several long-term banding stations in Massachusetts and a couple in Vermont and Maine, but there's limited data from New Hampshire. However, from 2008 to 2010, a woman named Chris Volanti studied saw-whet migration through Keene and points further west for her master's degree at Antioch. I had the pleasure of working with her for some of these years and continuing to collect some data into 2013. But I wanted to specifically mention her study here because I'll be referring to some of her data a little later in the presentation. And then we started this Harris Center banding project in 2022, so just 2 years ago. And we had numerous goals that we wanted to set and to strive towards. So I'll go through those quickly. We want to maintain a long-term saw-whet owl fall migration monitoring station in southern New Hampshire, where we can document their migration, population and demographics, monitor trends over time, and contribute to both regional and large-scale studies. We will participate in Project Owlnet by using recommended methodology and contributing knowledge and ideas and experience with different people in the project. We're hoping to provide a venue for collaboration with other researchers or students in the future. Right now, we are collecting the basic amount of data needed to monitor their population and migration, but we'd be happy to entertain additional projects to dive deeper into the species as well. And then, of course, education is a huge part of the Harris Center mission. And as such, we will always offer educational opportunities related to this project in the form of banding demonstrations and talks such as this one tonight. And at the banding station, we will offer training for volunteers and to inspire more aspiring scientists and conservationists, educators, amongst many others. So before venturing out to band saw-whets, we have to make sure we have all our ducks in a row. The first step is to obtain and make sure all necessary permits are up to date for our work. In order to band birds, we need to have a federal bird banding permit. These permits require a number of years of technical training and experience to obtain. We also need bands in order to band the birds, so we can get those from the bird banding lab. We also need to have a scientific permit from New Hampshire Fish and Game to do this work. So we have 2 sites that we are currently using for our study. One is in Hancock and one is in Nelson, New Hampshire, so right around the Harris Center. They were selected for the study because they are in mixed forest with a decent percent of conifer cover. So after the leaves fall off the trees, there's still some cover for the saw-whets to come into. Excuse me. The sites are also slightly higher in elevation and have decent access in terms of parking areas and trails for volunteers and visitors to get to the sites. So for catching owls, we use what are called mist nets, such as the one pictured here on the right. This is not at one of our sites, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what these nets look like. It's nearly invisible in nighttime settings. They're made of very fine nylon mesh, and there are 5 lines that the net is weaved into to form pockets. The nets are designed to gently catch birds, such that when they fly in, they fall into one of these pockets and get caught. We use 4 mist nets at each of our sites. We open the net about an hour after sunset, turn on the audio lure with the male's call, and we have a volunteer remain at the nets for the half-hour shifts that we do. The volunteer is there to monitor the area for predators and also to inform us if we are catching any owls. The nets and lure remain on and open for a minimum of 4 hours each night, as long as the weather cooperates. We do not do this research if it's raining or too windy. And then at the end of the night, we turn off the lure and close the nets and finish up for the night. So because these are wild birds, we need our data collection process to be quick, safe, and efficient, so we can get these owls back moving again. When we check the nets every half hour, We turn the audio lure down and scan all parts of the nets with our flashlights or headlamps for leaves or other debris or little brown feathery birds in the pockets, like you can see on the left here. If any are captured, we first determine which side of the net they flew into, and then they are carefully extracted by trained individuals. So this is a matter of taking the bird out of the net pocket by securely holding the bird and carefully pulling the net away from the feathers. Once we get them out of the nets, we place them in cloth bags to carry them back to the banding table, and this is a method to keep them calm. In the past 2 years, one net check has resulted in anywhere from 0 to 6 owls at a time. More often 0 than not, but we have gotten as many as 6. This is a photo of staff and volunteers holding 4 owls in bags that we captured in one run just before we started banding them. And when we are ready to start banding the owls and collecting data, we take them out of the bags. We check to make sure that they are not already wearing a band. If they are, I read the band and have every volunteer independently read the number 2 to make sure we all agree on it. Some of the older bands can be a little more worn or dirty and challenging to read. Also, some of us are getting older and our eyesight is not as good, so that's a factor. So we like to double check the number with as many people that are there as possible. And then capturing a bird that is already banded is really the most exciting part of this project because it's the initial mystery of wondering where this bird came from. When we capture a banded bird, we report it to the bird banding lab. They provide us with information about where that bird was originally banded and any associated data that came with it. They will also let the original bander know where and when that bird was recaptured. One of the unique things about Saw-whet banding stations is the high chance of recapturing a banded bird. So whereas for most other songbirds, the chance of capturing a bird at a different banding station is less than 1%, with saw-whets, it's something like 3 to 5% of all captures may be banded birds. So if the owl is not banded, we use specially designed pliers to place a band on the leg. The pliers are designed to fit over the owl's leg and close the band without squeezing the bird's leg. The photo on the right shows a close-up of the owl's leg with the band on it, and you can see just how feathery those legs are. So we partially close the bands initially. We give the band a little twirl around the leg to make sure no feathers are stuck in the way, and then we close the band the remainder of the way. Their legs are so feathery that you probably wouldn't be able to easily see a band on an owl in the wild if it's perched in a tree, for example. So you'd really probably have to catch the owl at a banding station to know for sure that it had a band on it. The next step is to measure the mass of the bird. This can help us to determine the owl's sex. The saw-whets are only moderately sexually dimorphic. There's no plumage difference between them at all, but the males are smaller than the females. To measure the mass, we place the owl in a can with holes in it to allow the owl to breathe more easily. Depending on the sex of the bird and how recently it's eaten, they can measure anywhere from 70 grams, which is about the same as a chicken egg, and 115 grams, which is a little more than a stick of butter. If the owl is 78 grams or less, then we have a male. If it's 93 grams or more, it's a female. So there's still an unknown category between 79 and 92 grams where we can use the wing cord length to help put them into one sex category or another. And to measure the wing cord, we use a specially designed ruler to record the length of the closed wing. Once we have that, we can refer to a chart that was developed by an ecologist named David Brinker. This chart uses a combination of the mass and the wing cord length to help determine sex if the mass alone doesn't get us there. So there's still an area of overlap in the chart where larger males and smaller females cannot be easily distinguished. So we could still end up with some unknown sex owls at the end of the night. The next step is to age the owls, which involves looking at flight feathers. Owls do not molt all their flight feathers each year. But when they do, it's relatively predictable. It's in a relatively predictable pattern that can help us determine the bird's age. Different color flight feathers indicate different aged feathers. The feathers go through a lot of wear and tear over the years, so older feathers are generally lighter in color and maybe more worn in appearance, whereas new feathers are darker brown and fresher in appearance. So all the flight feathers in this photo are an even, consistent color because they grew all the same year. When we see all flight feathers the same color, it indicates it's a hatchier bird, meaning that it hatched sometime the same year that it was captured. In this middle photo, we have a typical second year molt pattern. The lighter, more coffee brown feathers in the middle are older. These are the original feathers that the bird grew after hatching and has never molted these. Whereas the outermost feathers at the top of the photo and the innermost feathers at the bottom in that photo are darker, suggesting that they are newer feathers. And then in this photo on the right, we have an older bird. You can see a mix of new and older feathers here. That's not in the typical second year pattern that I just described a second ago. This pattern is a little more haphazard and may show multiple generations of feathers. In this case, this is a after second year owl because we know it's gone through more than 2 years since hatching, but it's difficult to know how many exactly. There is also an after hatch year category, which I don't have a photo for, but that basically refers to a bird that's older than a hatch year and could be an owl that went through some body molt, but no molt in the flight feathers for some reason. It can be difficult to determine new, old, and very old feathers on these older birds, sometimes by just using our headlamps. So in these cases, we can use a black light on the underside of the wing to age the feathers. Owl feathers contain a pigment called porphyrin, which fluoresces pink in UV lights. These porphyrins degrade quickly with exposure to sunlight, but new feathers glow pink, while older feathers will be faded pink or have no fluorescence at all. In this bird, the pink feathers are new or young feathers, and the lighter pink feathers are older feathers, while the whitest feathers are the oldest ones there. And you can see that there is some wear and tear on those oldest feathers as well. So we band and collect data from each owl in a roughly 5-minute time frame or so. That way we can get them moving again as soon as possible. All the data we collect, plus any other interesting notes about the owl, are recorded on data sheets. We review them to make sure we have everything we need. And then we get the owl ready for release. So for releasing the owl, we walk a little ways from the banding table. We turn off our headlamp. We place the owl in a secure location on our arm, and we let the owl fly off when it's ready to. We don't have any photos of this because we need to let the owls readjust to the dark again. We want them to get moving as soon as they are ready. So sometimes this is immediate. Other times they spend some time on our arm and hang out with us for a bit. Once they fly off, they'll sometimes start moving immediately. Other times we'll spot them monitoring us for a while, such as in this photo on the right. Okay, so now getting into some of the fun stuff of showing our results. So the next several slides, I'm going to present a series of graphs from our 2 years of data, and I'll talk about what they show, and then afterward I'll discuss what these results mean in the bigger picture of Saw-whet research. So this table shows some of the quick at-a-glance differences between the 2 seasons. First, we started our banding season on September 30th in 2022 and went on and off for a 7-week period, operating on most good weather nights, but not quite all of them. As this was our first year running the program, we gave ourselves some flexibility in banding dates so that we could fine-tune our methods, figure out what was going to work best for us in terms of regular operation, locations we wanted to use, timing, personnel, etc. And we decided to streamline our efforts into a 5-week window this past year, since we all have busy work schedules and need to get some sleep sometimes as well. So in 2023, our season started on October 8th and wrapped up on November 14th. In 2022, we were open for 26 nights over a 7-week period, and we caught 53 owls. This past season, we were open for 22 nights over a 5-week period and captured 100 owls. So this averages out to about 2 owls per night in 2022 compared to 5 owls per night in 2023. 2022 overall was a quieter year in terms of owl captures, and our capture rate, which is the way we standardize our data to include the amount of effort we put into our work. I'll explain that more in a bit. Also reflected this with a higher capture rate in 2023. So this first graph shows the number of owls we captured each night we were open in 2022. If there are no points for particular dates on this graph, it's because we didn't band on those nights as a result of poor weather or scheduling conflicts. As you can see, our first owl captures were on October 2nd, and our last was on the last day we were open, which was November 19th. Most nights resulted in 4 or fewer captures, and several nights with no captures. We also had one big night on October 27th when we captured 15 owls. And in 2023, our first capture was on our first night out on October 8th, and our last capture was on November 12th. The only nights with no captures were earlier in the season, and the last night we were out as well. We had many nights with 6 owl captures, with 2 big pushes of owls that occurred on Halloween and about a week later on November 5th as well. Generally, most of those nights when we catch a large number of owls, these nights occur when the weather is really clear and there's a light northerly wind and not too much moonlight either. So in terms of day-to-day differences, we could see that our big movements in 2023 occurred there it is, okay. So in terms of day-to-day differences, we could see that our big movements in 2023 occurred 4 and 9 days later than our big one in 2022. Because some of these day-to-day differences over the years can be due to weather patterns, I also graphed our results by week to see how they shaped up in terms of differences. So in 2022, which is the blue on the graph, week 43, which is the last full week in October, that week had the most captures. In fact, 45% of our captures occurred in that 1 week that year. And in 2023, which is in 2023, week 44, which is the end of October and early November, and week 45, they seem to have really big weeks as well. 28 owls were caught in each of those 2 weeks. So it's the same number of owls were caught in both those 2 weeks, but we need to also look at this data in terms of our effort as well. So to do this, we can look at what we call capture rate. Capture rate is the number of owls caught per net hour, which is the number of hours that each of our net was open. Basically, this takes into account how many nets are open, how many hours they are open, and how many owls were caught. It's a way to standardize our efforts, since night by night or week by week may be different. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this because it can be kind of hard to grasp, other than to say that it also helps us to monitor the intensity of movement for these birds. So for 2022, clearly we can see that the peak movement occurred in week 43, which again is the end of October. And then for 2023, even though we caught the same number of owls in week 44 and 45 with those 28 owls each of those weeks, our capture rate ended up being higher in week 44, suggesting that this was the timing of peak movement. So this graph shows the percentage of captures each year that were female, male, or unknown. As you can see, the vast majority of owls that we capture are female. This is a widely observed phenomenon at other saw-whet stations, and I'll dig more into that in a little bit. But in about 85% of owls captured in 2022 were female, while 93% were female in 2023. And we did capture a few males in 2022, but just one in 2023. However, we did have several unknowns in both years, so it's possible that we had more males both years than we were able to confirm. This graph shows the percentage of captures according to owl ages. The blue on the graph shows the percentage of hatch year owls. In 2022, we had 64% of our captures were hatch year birds, while only 13% were hatch year in 2023. So basically, more hatch years were captured in 2022 and more older birds were captured in 2023. Did I say that right? Hatch years dominated 2022 and adult birds in 2023. Okay. So clearly 2 vastly different years in terms of age ranges for birds. And then here is our encounter map, which is the most exciting part for me and I think for a lot of us. It shows how saw-whets that have passed through New Hampshire are connected to other regions of North America. So far, only one of the owls we've banned at the Harris Center has been encountered elsewhere. And we've caught 4 owls that were originally banded at other stations, connecting us to a total of 5 different stations so far in the 2 years of our study. So the solid yellow lines on the map show what we term same season encounters. And we've had 2 of these during the course of our study so far. An owl banded in Nelson, New Hampshire in 2022 was captured 24 days later in Pennington, New Jersey, traveling a straight line distance of 230 miles, which is equivalent to about 9.6 miles per night. And then another banded owl from Quebec was captured at our station in Nelson 19 nights after it was first banded, moving a distance of 375 miles for an average of 19.7 miles per night. So of course, we don't know the exact route that these owls took or if they traveled every single night that they were on their journey, but it still gives us a sense of direction and relative rate of movement for these owls. And then we had 3 other birds we captured in 2023 that were originally banded the season before in 2022. So the dotted lines on the map show our connection to those stations, but certainly not a migratory route given that a spring migration occurred between these years that we observed them. One was originally banded in coastal Maryland, another in southeast Pennsylvania, and another in northern West Virginia. In terms of the Maryland site, I wanted to point out something interesting. This bird was banded as a hatchier bird on Halloween in 2022. And it was captured in Nelson exactly 1 year later on Halloween in 2023. So the distance between stations is 372 miles. So it's interesting to see the difference in location for the same date in different years. And we'll look more at this bird again in a minute. So in addition to documenting the migration time and demographics of these owls, we also take other notes about these birds as well. So for example, saw-whets rarely travel alone. Many are carrying parasites, such as this lousefly at the top right corner. So we document any time that we observed these parasites on them. Usually it's in very low numbers, it's just one flying around. We also had an owl where a feather was growing in a reversed direction, it appeared, just above the facial disc, resulting in it popping up like that. And then we had an owl last year that had a deformity in its foot. Its talon was shorter compared to the others and was pointing up slightly, kind of looking like it was drinking tea very properly or something. And then another owl had unusual black spots on its yellow iris. In all of these cases, the owls were older birds and none seemed to have any handicaps associated with these features, but it's just interesting to keep track of the different characteristics that we find on these birds. Okay, so to recap, in just the 2 years of this study, we've been able to document several things. We've documented movement timing with migration appearing to occur throughout the month of October in our area and into at least the middle of November. Peak movement was the end of October in 2022 and was in early November in 2023. Discussion amongst Project OwlNet participants confirmed that migration was late in 2023 compared to their many years of previous banning data. So we weren't alone in noticing that migration did seem late this past year. And then in quickly looking through some of Chris Volante's data, who I mentioned earlier, who did the study of saw-whet migration from 2008 to 2010 in New Hampshire, she documented the majority of movement to occur between the second week of October and the last week of October. So our data just for these 2 years shows that we are kind of on the later end of what she observed. But in looking through other literature, our research shows that for our latitude, we're right around where we should be in terms of timing. But again, this is only 2 years worth of data, so we still have a number of years before we start seeing any trends. And then Chris and I are also hoping to work together to see what, if anything, we can do to compare some of our results with hers, given that a lot could have changed in the last 13 to 15 years since her study. And then our same season encounters indicate southward movement, as would be expected for migratory birds this time of year, and has been documented by numerous studies. The straight line distance rate of travel was between 10 to 20 miles per night for our birds, and this is right in the ballpark of what many other studies have documented as well. But I do want to go back to that Maryland bird for a second because it's a little interesting to talk about. So again, this bird was banded on Halloween in 2022 as a hatch year bird and was recaptured at our site in New Hampshire exactly 1 year later on Halloween as a second year. So that's a pretty tremendous 372-mile straight line difference in location of where this bird was captured just 1 year apart. So this could suggest a number of different things. The first is it was a hatch year bird in 2022. There are some studies that have indicated that during good breeding years, the hatch year birds move earlier than the adults. Or it represents the later movement we had in 2023, and this bird just got a later start to migration than it did the year before, resulting in its presence further north on Halloween than it was the year before. So in these two cases, we are assuming that this owl took a similar migration route both these fall seasons. This is entirely possible since research has shown that many saw-whets are pretty faithful to their migration paths. But we also have learned that they are more nomadic in terms of where they end up during the breeding or wintering season as well, and are unlikely to return to the exact same site year after year. So the difference in this owl's location on the same date from 1 year to the next could also be a function of how far north the owl bred or attempted to breed this year and how far south it decides to winter this year. So likely it's a combination of some of these factors, and we won't really know for sure unless this owl is captured again a few times or if we put additional tracking equipment on it to learn more about its movements. But I did want to point it out just because it was the exact same date both years, and it's kind of interesting to see that. So as our project continues into the future, more same season and interseason captures will continue to add to this map here and to our knowledge base of rate of travel, direction of movement, migration routes, and perhaps it'll even pick up on some of their eruptive and nomadic tendencies as well. Okay, so going back to this list, we've also documented that more owls seem to be moving through our region in 2023 than 2022. However, this seems to be a little bit of a mystery to me, especially given that our age ratios suggest that 2022 was a better breeding season. But I do want to say that 2022 was the first year of our study, and we were working on refining our methods in terms of site locations, net placement, audio lure volume, and we weren't operating at the same frequency we were in 2023. But so it's possible we missed some birds that year, but I still don't expect that we would have exceeded the number of birds we did this year. I haven't really had time to dig into that aspect of things too much, and I may not given some of the variables in place, but I wanted to mention that difference in the 2 years in terms of our numbers. It just seemed a little wonky to me. So what I do know based on correspondence amongst Project OwlNet partners is that 2023 was a bit of a bizarre year for many stations. Many were expecting there to be a crash based on where we are in the population cycle for these birds, and also due to the poor cone crop last winter up in the boreal forest, which would impact the small mammal population and therefore the prey availability during owl breeding season. It was looking like that was going to be the case, that there was going to be a crash, but it turns out that migration was just really slow to get going. It does appear it was a poor breeding season due to the low number of hatch year birds that was observed across many northeastern stations. But the total capture numbers at a lot of sites were actually pretty decent, including at our own. The 4-year population boom and bust cycle that I had mentioned earlier was documented for a number of years, but it hasn't been as obvious in recent years. So that aspect of their population kind of warrants continued monitoring to document, if these patterns are shifting and to perhaps figure out what's going on. What we do know is that the age demographics vary greatly from year to year and among locations. Usually the annual variation in the number of migrating saw-whets is strongly influenced by the number of hatch year birds. And a recent review of banding data from several long-term stations in the East determined that saw-whet populations have been relatively stable over the last 25 years with a non-significant negative trend. So as more stations continue to collect long-term data, perhaps these trends can be reviewed again in the future. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is the sex ratio. The vast majority of owls captured at banding stations, including ours, are female birds. This could be related to one or a combination of factors, and it's still a question that is awaiting confirmation. So one hypothesis for this is that we are playing the male's broadcasting call. So females may just be more attracted to it, even though it's the wrong time of year for breeding. A second possibility is that males may be disinterested in the call or wary of getting too close to a really big sounding saw-whet owl and avoid the area altogether. I do believe one study noted that smaller owls tended to be caught further from the lure, and our smaller owls, smaller saw-whets are usually the males. However, even before the use of the broadcasting call, fewer males were being caught in nets. So another hypothesis is that there may be a sex differentiated migration in which males do not migrate or migrate as far as females. Though all banding sites catch more females than males, more northern latitude banding sites proportionally catch more males than more southern latitude. So it's possible that adult males may have a competitive advantage in establishing and maintaining territory if they don't migrate, or at least don't migrate as far. They may also be more effective hunters in challenging winter conditions than the females, given that they have more experience as the primary provisioners during nesting season. And I didn't show this data in our results, but the ages of the males we've captured have been about half hatchier birds and the rest have been adults. More southern latitudes are more likely to catch only hatchier males rather than more adults. This could be because hatchier males are more likely to migrate with the females since they do not yet have a territory to protect. It could be a combination of many of these factors, but either way, these are hypotheses that are still awaiting additional evidence to confirm. So to wrap up this side of the discussion, right now our future plans are to continue running this long-term monitoring station to document saw-whet migration and demographics of the region, and continue sharing that information with the broader owl banding community to contribute to large-scale studies. And our station can also serve as a venue for collaboration with researchers too. There are a lot of questions that still remain with this species. Perhaps someone will want to launch some additional studies related to different aspects of this bird. And I think we'd be open to working with them on that as well and supporting their efforts. And then, of course, we plan to continue offering banding demonstrations as well. So in that regard, the banding demonstrations are a really important part of this program. Saw-whets can have a significant impact as ambassadors for the natural world, inspiring interest in all different aspects of biology, whether it's wildlife biology, ornithology, conservation, ecology. Since 2022, we've offered several banding demonstrations to the public and families and other groups, and then we've reached over 160 individuals in just those 2 years. So I believe just about all of them have been able to observe an owl being banded. As these are wild birds, we certainly cannot guarantee that participants will get to see an owl, but so far our track record has been pretty good in the 2 years, and I just hope I didn't just jinx that. But if you've joined us on a demonstration in the past, thank you for coming. But if you'd like to come in the future, keep your eye on the Harris Center calendar and newsletters. The dates are usually announced a couple months in advance, so I'd say probably July or August, start looking for them. And they do fill up pretty quickly, so keep that in mind if you would like to attend. And if you would like to support this saw-whet research effort with the Harris Center, you can adopt an owl. You'll receive a certificate that says the owl's band number, its age, sex, weight, and the date it was banded. And if that owl is ever encountered again, you'll be notified about where it was seen, which is pretty cool. The adoptions are $50, and your adoption goes to supporting staff and future equipment needs. So supporting our project can help with the continued research and conservation of the species, but there are things you can also do on your own property to help support saw-whets as well. For example, saw-whets love diverse structure, so tangles of bushes, dense evergreen shrubs, or fallen trees in the woods can all be beneficial cover for saw-whets. Leaving dead or dying trees, which we also call snags, is great for providing nesting habitat, especially if those trees have cavities in them. Woodlots, even very small ones between houses, can provide excellent stopover areas for owls during migration. I know a number of people in major cities that have texted me saying that they stumbled across a saw-whet in the fall when tromping through their little neighboring woodlots or while doing yard work in their tiny backyard. And then with concerns for climate change impact to saw-whets, you can certainly do what you can to reduce your carbon footprint. There are also nest box designs you can use to provide additional nesting opportunities for these birds in your backyard. And then I always am an advocate for saying, please don't use rodenticides at home. There are plenty of other ways to get rid of mice. Of course, keep your cats indoors. I don't actually know of any incidences personally in which saw-whets have been killed by cats, but it's certainly a possibility. And it's better for all bird species if cats stay indoors. And then furthermore, you can be a citizen scientist in that you can, if you see or hear of a saw-whet in your backyard, you can report your observation to eBird or other platforms or share it with your local conservation organizations. And can contribute that knowledge about where the species is being observed. So finally, I just wanted to say thank you to the Harris Center's 50th Anniversary Fund for helping to fund these 2 years of the project. And thanks to all the volunteers that have spent many nights in the cold and dark helping with this banding project. Also a special thank you to Brett and Phil for spearheading this project with me and making everything roll smoothly with the Harris Center. Thank you to Anna Marie for her continued almost near nightly dedication to the project and as our banding assistant this past year. Also to John Atwood for having me on his banding permit, and also to my husband for tolerating my many late nights away from home. And I think that's it. So I guess we have a few minutes left for questions. If you want to contact Brett or Phil about anything else, they've also left their email addresses up here too.
Okay, thanks so much, Hill. That was excellent. A great comprehensive look at saw-whet owl biology, life histories, their fascination at banding stations, what we're learning, and a lot about the Harris Center project. So yeah, we really appreciate all the work you're doing, and it's great to work alongside you on this effort. And yeah, there were a lot of interested folks on the Zoom. I think you got around to answering many of the questions, but we still got several questions here that maybe you can take a crack at. So I'll start in with a question from Francie about where have they been found in the Monadnock region, aside from our 2 banding stations, I'm guessing. Is that
Yeah,
something
I mean,
you can crack at?
I guess I can't remember what year it was. I want to say it was during the pandemic, 2020 or 2021. It seemed like it was a really big breeding season for saw-whets in our region. I remember hearing one calling in May up actually on, I think it was Thumb Mountain at the Harris Center land. We were out for a hike that day and heard one calling up there. But really, if you look in, especially during breeding season, coniferous areas are going to be popular areas to find these birds, and at higher altitudes too. But you can really find them just about anywhere. And eBird, which is a citizen science platform for reporting bird observations, is a great resource for looking to see where these birds have been found too. So.
And I'll add that finding a saw-whet owl often means hearing a saw-whet owl instead of seeing it. I think there are very few of us who have been lucky enough to stumble across one just by accident. But they do pass through in numbers every spring and fall, and they're more vocal in the spring. So starting in March, definitely be on the listen as you're out on quiet nights, right around sunset. I've had good luck in the Monadnock region in several spots. So yeah, hope you can hear one. And I'll go to a question about longevity by both Francie and Sue, who asked how long do they live? And maybe you got at this a little bit, but I don't know if you have any answers to maybe record longevity of saw-whets.
Yeah. I believe so. The banding data that that we have on these birds suggests they live an average of about, I think it's 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. For the longest record, I can't recall. I want to say 9 years was the record in the wild that was well documented, but there was a report of one that might have been 14 years old in the wild, but I'm not sure if that was ever confirmed or not. So they can live a pretty decent long time, but probably 3 or 4 years is the average.
Great. Okay, and then several folks expressed interest in attracting saw-whet owls and housing them in nest boxes in their backyards. So a few questions on that came in. One from Scott asking about what is a recommended height for nest boxes? What direction should they face? Hill, if you have that, I did find that information, so, but I'll turn it to you first.
Yeah, if you have the correct answers, go for it. I don't know anything about direction to face. I know that's common with a lot of nest box works, but I believe they can nest at just about any level on a tree. But if you have a better answer for that, go for it. So
okay, yeah, according to Cornell's website, Nest Watch, which is their nest box data site, 12 to 15 feet seems to be the preferred height, and the nest boxes should face south, presumably for warmth and morning sun in the cooler spring season. So that was what I got out of that. I can add that I've seen a couple of nesting pairs in the Monadnock region using old wood duck boxes and one in a cavity of a tree, and yeah, it seems to fit that same criteria from memory. So so yeah, give it a try. There are nest boxes online that you can check out on the Cornell's Nest Watch website, and we'll post a link to that shortly. Let's see, one other question about nesting saw-whet owls. Susan asks, would barking dogs nearby make her yard less attractive for a nesting saw-whet owl, perhaps? What do you think?
oh, that's also a good question. I don't know if there is an answer to that, but I do know they are sensitive to disturbance, so that's something to think about for sure. But yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for that, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not so sure either. In some ways, I think that owls tolerate certain amount of disturbances fairly well, but yeah, impacts that are persistent, like maybe a persistently barking dog could discourage saw-whets from nesting. Mary, the final question that I have here from Mary, postulating about the later migration that we're seeing in the last 13 to 15 years with these recent 2 years of data. Perhaps climate change is causing this later migration as areas to the north are staying warmer later. What's the thought on that, Hill? That certainly sounds, that resonates with Hawkwatch data for diurnal daytime migrating raptors. Has that shown to be the case for saw-whets, maybe?
I think they are starting to notice that as well. There might be a published paper related to it and reviewing saw-whet data, but I haven't looked for it in a while. But I seem to recall that they are recording a delay of about a day per year in the migration of saw-whets over, I think it was the last 20 years or so. But I'd have to double check that for sure to know and if that trend was significant or not. So, but I think you're noticing that with hawks as well, right? You're noticing a delay.
Yeah, there does seem to be a later migration for certain species that are not passing through in at the same time, and this is it seems like they're staying further north longer, and different counts later on, the Christmas bird count is backing that up, that the numbers seem to be staying strong further to the north later on. So I wouldn't be surprised if that same trend holds true for saw-whets.
Yeah.
One last question just came in, and it had to do with disturbance as well. I don't think we mentioned this specifically, Hill. You mentioned predators, but do barred owls discourage saw-whet owls from from being present in an area?
I don't know about present in an area, but it certainly seems like a possibility since they are a predator to saw-whets for sure. I don't know of any studies where seeing overlap in terms of barred owl nesting sites and saw-whet nesting sites. Obviously, they're both nocturnal species, so it's a possibility that barred owls would deter saw-whets from not being in the area. There's competition as well too. So yeah, I would imagine that barred owls would keep saw-whets away.
Okay, well, that's all we have. So great questions, everybody. And thanks once again, Hill, for such an excellent presentation. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in tonight.